What an introduction. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the right one. And actually, it's this year 30 years since I made my first presentation at Iceland. So it was a Nordisk Barnevernskongress in 1988. Maybe some of you were there. And so nice to be back. I've been there several times. And there's a immensely close connection between Iceland and Norway in many ways. And thank you for bragging about Norwegians. And thank you for not mentioning soccer. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so this is my topic. I go straight ahead. Early intervention for vulnerable children. And this is the state of the art, so to speak, according to Terje Ogden. But I think it's rather in line with what we think we know today internationally on how to prevent and how to intervene at earliest possible time for children at risk. And say, what we need to do is to have intervention that address the known risk factors, home conditions, school conditions, friends, whatever, and we do that across services, across professions, across sectors. And of course, we have a lot of effort into community-based services or in the municipalities. So in Norway, we have a build-down of specialist services and increased efforts at the municipal level. And of course, at the heart of the interventions are the family and the social network. That's the main target as a bullseye, but also schools as an important target for our interventions. And as we have found, this is the primary vehicle for achieving favorable child and family outcomes in this broad field. And the most positive results or outcomes we have from what we call behavioral treatment principles applied with ecological and systemic conceptual frameworks, and that's addressing family, social networks, and the local community. And of course, very important in the whole process is strong focus on what we call quality assurance in order to secure that we do things as they are intended. We do adherence measure or support interventionist fidelity. So in a way, this ranges across a lot of interventions. And this is almost the whole alphabet. This is the interventions we have worked with in Norway over the last 15, 17 years. And as you see at the top, we have one line here for adolescents, starting with multisystemic therapy, and one line for children, starting with parent management training, which you're going to hear about later today. And what I want to show you with this figure is, in a way, this is a dynamic process. We didn't stop with these two. We start to develop new adaptations in order to reach different children, different problems, different risk factors. And we're still in the process, and I'm going to say a little bit about those lowers here, the match intervention and the COBA, which are piloting now. But I will stick to the child line here and start with the school intervention. And we have implemented the American school-wide positive behavior support model, adapted it to Norwegian conditions, and it's a kind of intervention pyramid. And the aim is set here to reduce problem behavior, promote social competence, and support positive behavior in schools. It's a school-wide effort, team-based approach with leadership commitment. It's skills-based. We teach the children rules and expectations, and we monitor student behavior. For instance, with what we call the school-wide information system. And of course, the whole process is monitored, how we implement this model in Norwegian schools. And today, about 10% of Norwegian schools at the primary level have implemented this model. It's 230 schools, I think. And I think the evaluation study we conducted have given rather optimistic outcomes, mostly from the teachers. The student doesn't register much change. What we found out is that it reduces problem behavior in school, which has been an important target in Norway. It's improved learning climate, less exclusion of students, more are integrated or included. There are improvement in the staff's behavioral practice. They talk more nicely to the children, and there's increased individual and collective efficacy among staff. They feel more competent, they say. And there are some moderating effects. The model worked best when the implementation was high. It worked best in small to moderately sized schools, or in other words, it's more difficult to implement the model in large schools, and it worked best with high-risk students, which was also the intention of the model, to reach those who needed it most. The next line I want to develop a little bit on is the parent management training, which we have, in a way, adapted to the municipal level in an intervention called Early Intervention for Children at Risk. And this is an intervention where we intend to lower the threshold for contacts, and we train municipal people from health stations, from child welfare, from the school psychological services to deliver these services in a modularized version. So one part of it is brief parent training, another is social skills training with the children, parent groups, and school consultation. And the model looks, okay, this is just the research outcomes. We tested everything in randomized controlled trial. And the nice thing here, of course, is a table. The less nice thing is no one reads this. No one reads this. It's too complicated, it's too technical. But it has some good messages then. And this is the diamond, as we call it, the different modules in the TBIR model, Early Intervention for Children at Risk. And it's an intention to help parents as early as possible, but who could manage with shorter intervention than the full treatment. And we don't use diagnostic approach here. It's a low threshold for taking contact and getting help without being a client. It's been implemented in a variety of primary care settings. As I say, low threshold for intake, fewer sessions, and shorter duration. And by 2015, we trained more than 1,000 practitioners in the municipalities, in more than 100 municipalities, and they have implemented one or more of the modules. It's quite popular in Norway, actually, as a way of strengthening municipal services across professions, across services. And as you know in the table, just take you very briefly through it. We have a PMTO full scale for those who don't respond to the TBIR intervention. So then we have in the reserve the full treatment for these parents. We have a counseling model called brief parent training. We have the social skills training for children. We have PMTO group intervention for minority families, PMTO group intervention for other families, and consultation to practitioners in schools and childcare. A municipal can take one or more of these modules into their practice according to their needs and, of course, to their budgets. And every one of these interventions then tested to see do they work separately, and actually they do. And as you see, we have then training courses for practitioners in the municipalities, so they get trained and they deliver these services, not the specialists. So by now we have 103 municipalities. I think it's rather 116, more than 1,000 practitioners, and we have about 350 certified or trained PMTO therapists working in Norway, different municipalities. And we also started to pilot a version of multisystemic therapy called MSD-CAN, because the regular MSD model is targeting adolescents with serious behavior problems, but this model actually targets quite another group. It's a team-based treatment. It's the same MSD teams, but the target groups are children and adolescents between 6 and 18 years of age who have experienced physical violence or neglect in their home. So rather than taking them out of the home, we try to build secure home structures by daily visits and a rather tight schedule for intervention with these families. So we're piloting that in 2 of the, let's say, exceptionally good municipalities in Norway, Bærum and Asker. And then I just want to introduce you to what I talked about now is what we call standard structured programs. You know, they come as packages. And then we started to unpack the interventions, like 2 authors from the United States, Peter and Haldin, and they tried to decompose and say, okay, if you look at successful treatments of different problems, what are the intervention components? So we're talking about core components or working elements, and saying maybe combine them in a different way. So rather than have one program for conduct problems, one for anxiety, one for depression, one for trauma, we say, can we make programs across the different lines of work or problems that children have? Because we can't train the child welfare service in 50 programs, neither can we with the mental health services. So we try to combine and support the program activity. So this is a trend that we also try to develop on. And one is then called MATCH, stands for Modular Approach to Therapy for Children. And the ADTC are the groups that we address: anxiety, depression, trauma, and conduct problems. So we have one intervention line within the program for anxiety, one for depression, one for treatment, trauma, and one for treatment of conduct problems. So it's combined, but then it's made into a program. So still, it is manualized, it is tested, you have fidelity control as in the standard program, but in a way it cuts across several lines of programs. And we're testing this model now in 6 child and adolescent psychiatric treatment centers in Norway. I think this is a good model for mental health services, but hopefully may also transfer some of the knowledge and experiences to the child welfare services after a while. And it's really consisting of well-known practice elements. It's a counting procedure. We go through anxiety programs saying, what are the most common interventions like exposure or whatever, and then put it together in a new program. It's the same content as in other evidence-based interventions, but the treatment design is different because we combine across. And now we test it in 6 psychiatric polyclinics from 2016. And this gives you a brief picture of how the different legs of the treatment program is operationalized. You see here we have one for anxiety, one for depression, one for trauma, and one for behavior problems. So in a way, children may have different kinds of problems or a combination of problems, and the programs try to cover the broad scale of the problem structure. And an important part of this is what we call measurement feedback systems. So every week, when the family has been to treatment, they fill out a form that is fed back to the therapist, where they talk about what their main problems are now. So we have more dynamic therapies based on feedback loops from the patients or the clients or the families or the users, whatever you call them. And it's a quite common approach now used also in treatment for adolescents and adults. So this guides the treatment. So it's a very important feedback loop in the process and an important part of this multi-modular approach. And then, last but not least, we have a project where we try to intervene for children at risk in school. It's a common elements methodology, just like MATCH, but this time focused rather on academic attainment rather than behavior and mental health. It's built on an approach called integrated knowledge transition, which is a collaboration between researchers and practitioners. So they meet, they talk, they discuss, and I try to find an intervention that's both working, it's in accordance with we have our research knowledge, but also acceptable to the practitioners, match their experiences, their attitudes. So it's a rather a collaborative project rather than the researchers give their instructions top-down. This is an intervention for children 1st to 7th grade, and caregivers receive support. So it's an intervention given by the municipal child welfare services. It's delivered in 6 sections over a period of 6 months, at home visits, or in other settings if the parents prefer that. We call it a co-creation phase, where researchers and practitioners develop and enhance academic support. And the 4 core components is simply guidance in positive parental involvement, not over-involvement, or not too little involvement, to find the right way of doing it. Structured tutoring, how they may help the children, or some other tutors may help the children with their homework. The parents get guidance in homework structure and the routines, how to organize it in their homes, and how they should reinforce the children, giving praise and feedback without being too intense, without being too invading, and not being too laid back. We know that the attitudes communicated by parents, their actions, how they talk to the children, how they try to support them in their homework is quite important for how these children succeed in school. So this is now in an implementation phase where we try this model in 6 parts of Oslo and Drammen municipalities. So in the evaluation phase, these interventions are evaluated, and it's the same procedure. We put the elements together, we make a manual, we develop implementation components and fidelity measures, and see if this works and how it works and why it works. So anyway, it follows the same thing, but like Match, it's built on a model of common elements or working components. So the take-home message. These are just examples from the Norwegian practice. I wouldn't say this is the only way we should do it. They may be done in other ways, but there's a line through here. It's working structured, systematically, working across services, sectors, professions. We roll them all in. And when I started my career, it was very much what kind of theoretical orientation you had. Either it was psychodynamic, humanistic, or behavioral, and we couldn't talk together. Now we're doing research, and the research cuts across theories. So in a way, we have a common knowledge base, I think, to take from. And this is what we have done in Norway. You may learn from us. We're happy to share our experiences, but there are other options as well, both for standard programs and for making common elements programs. It's very up to the local interests and competence. But I think what all should have, even if it's hard to spell out, the Norwegian Center for Child Behavioral Development, I think every country should have a center, a stronghold that work with the implementation and evaluation of evidence-based practices, of standard programs. This shouldn't be fragmented. This shouldn't be decentralized. I think you need a center that represents continuity, who can train practitioners. We have no students at our center. We only have practitioners from Norwegian services. So we serve them. We make manuals, guidelines, material. We have booster sessions, we have supervision, everything, and we've done so consistently for the last 15 years. And we have planned to continue for another 15 years. Not with me, probably, but another one. So I think we need, it might be a university, it might be a college, or it might be a separate center. That isn't important. The important thing is that someone take the responsibility to follow these evidence-based practices, because it's a lot of work, and you need special kind of competence to train, to do fidelity controls, to evaluate, and to learn from the experiences. So research should be an important part. We shouldn't only say this is proven in the United States or Canada, whatever. The first we heard when we imported programs in Norway was, works in the United States, doesn't work here. And then only way to impress or convince Norwegian practitioners, politicians, or researchers was to conduct full-scale replication RCT studies. A lot of work, but then the protest became very quiet. So now I think we agree on, we have several options in Norway. They're good, they're not fantastic. You know, it's not a silver bullet solving every problem, but it increases the effectiveness, the capacity, the competence in the Norwegian services. We have several good indications of that. So that's why we recommend having research, having a sustainable center, and placing your bets on evidence-based or research-based or knowledge-based practices. The name may differ.
Ég er náttúrulega glemt að segja það, en Terje tekur við spurningum.
If you have any easy questions.
Yeah. So, why can't you play football any longer?
Shit!
Hvað er þessu? En þeir eru spurningar fyrir Terje, þá endilega, nægum tími. Þetta hefur bara gengið svona ótrúlega vel. Einhverjar spurningar? Já. Viltu tala í mikrofónu eða viltu ég endur það í spurninguna? Voru þið ekki með spurningu? Voru þið ekki með spurningu? Nei, voru þið bara spurningu. Þetta er spurningu.
We started the implementation now as a research-based project, so to speak, and it's especially services, and particularly the child and adolescent psychiatric services. So it's in outpatient clinics, 6 of them, 3 at the east and 3 at the west, because we think we tested under optimal conditions and see, is it possible to work across trauma, anxiety, depression, conduct problems, and still, get good results. So this is a program constructed by John Weiss at the Harvard Lab. They tried it once before, I think, in Hawaii, and now New Zealand and Norway is testing it next. But we start with the mental health services, but with a clear intention of moving the experience and the ideas from this highly specialized program to the municipal level, like early intervention for children at risk. We think this model should be broadened because this TBIR model in Norway started out as a model targeting conduct problems, and now we want that model at the municipal level to also include these other children, anxiety, depression, and trauma. Because as a lot of you experience, they often go together. We have a lot of comorbidity, as we say, or additional problems with these children. So we should have programs that are more broad and more robust over time. So in a way, we specialized for time now with serious behavior problems, and now it's how to broaden. And of course, part of the reason for that is that we see in Norway, as in Iceland, that mental health problems are increasing, particularly among young girls. They do very well in school, but they get stressed and sick. And so we have to have some interventions that had a broader scope then. But we start very specific with these treatment centers. I think they're the best then to take out the essence of the model.
Einhverjar fleiri spurningar? Já, þarna aftast úr salnum. Gott að nota mikrofónin sko, svo að þeir sem eru á Akureyri heyri líka. Alveg bara, gjör svo vel.
Hi, my name is Halldóra Mogensen. Thank you for your talk. I'm just quite curious about if you could talk a little bit about, because this seems to be helping children adapt to the current systems versus adapting our systems to the needs of the children. And I'm wondering if that is anything that's being looked at when it comes to preventive measures to help, because you're talking about this increasing depression in children. Are we looking at updating the school systems or looking at the needs of the children and maybe changing the environment, or is it just helping kids adapt to the current situation, the current environment? Thank you.
Yeah, it's very much about changing the environment and changing the ecology. And when it comes to prevention, I think this school model, which I talked about very briefly, the School by Positive Behavior Support, or PALS model, is a way we try to reach all children. We have some universal interventions trying to prevent, because we think schools are the ideal place to work with prevention, because we reach all children. Almost all children go to school, so this is a place to do it. And then most of what we do is rather targeting the children at risk with a low threshold interventions, and then we also have some very specialized intervention for those we do not reach with the other interventions. So we try to build, in a way, a chain of interventions, but I think going through the whole thing is what we call changing the ecology, the attitudes, the reactions, how we treat children, how we organize our services. So this, in a way, built in the whole process of change here.
Okay, any more questions? Já, það bara hérna á fremsta.
Reminds me of a program we looked at once called Ronnie the Runner. Also picking videos, but it's different.
Thank you, Terje, for your intervention. Now you have described the institutional requirements for the actual implementation of evidence-based programs cut across the different sectors. Now, obviously, these are expensive models. These are evidence-based, and you need to check the fidelity issues and so on, so they are pretty expensive to operate. How do you solve the issue of dealing with the actual costs in terms of the division of labor between the central versus the local government? Now you need to implement it on a local level. These are community interventions, but presumably the local structures are not able to finance them adequately. What sort of rules have you set in place to support the local communities to implement the evidence-based programs that you have described to us? Thank you.
To a certain extent, we have succeeded in convincing the politicians that this is, in a way, a cheap approach in the long run. You know, it's cost-effective to put your money in early interventions. But then we have what we call a structural reform in Norway, as in many other countries, where the government has signaled that they will cut down on specialist services and invest more in the municipalities. So Norwegian municipalities are promised quite a large increase in their funding in order to be able to finance this kind of activity. And then, of course, the municipality will always say that it's not enough money, but it is increasing substantially in Norway. So we're talking about the structural reform or a municipal reform, which is very much about the child welfare services, the mental health services, and school psychological services are increasing their budgets, their efforts, their positions at the local level. So I think that's part of the same process. And then we see the Norwegian government, in a way, have said that they want evidence-based services. They want what they call a knowledge-based society. So in a way, they're also interested in increasing research on effectiveness I'm also the leader of a research program in Norway called Research and Innovation in the Educational Field, and we are going to give out about 60 million Norwegian kroner a year for effectiveness testing in school, preferably RCTs. So in a way, there are several lines here running in the right direction seen from this perspective. And of course, we think by adding these programs and this kind of work, it's not only helping the children, we are also changing the interventionists or practitioners' way of thinking and working. So I think it's important how the services approach the problems.
Okay, any more questions? We still have time. Okay, you have answered all our questions. We can just stop now.
Oh, there's one there. Margaret.
Aha, sorry.
Okay, so thank you very much, Terje. So I'm Margaret, I'm the PMTO leader here in Iceland. So I have one question for you. I actually know the answer myself, but I would like to hear your answer to it. So talking about the financial piece, so you said, you know, how you are supporting the evidence and supporting the research piece, but how do you actually support the communities in actually the implementation process? You know, are you paying for the education of the trainers and things like that? I think that would be important for us to hear something about that.
Yeah.
We know you have the money from your oil, but how can we do it? Thank you.
Okay. Just to settle that, we can't use all oil money because it overheats the economy, so they're keeping the money back. They're using 4% each year, so it's not that stream of money as someone think. But, the idea is that our center is totally financed by public means. So we have our money, and therefore we can offer the municipalities training for free, supervision for free, implementation support for free. So our services doesn't cost them anything. They only have to cover their travel expenses or having people away from jobs, so it doesn't toll so much on their economy. And of course, we are very concerned and very particular in reporting how many families we treat each year. We register every MSD family. We have 800 MSD families per year. We have more than 2,000 PMTO TB families per year. We have 230 schools, and we report this back to the authorities and say, this is what you get for your money. And I think that's very important, this feedback loop from our center, our interventionists, and the political level, those who sit on the money sack.
Einhverjar fleiri spurningar? Já.
Hi, thank you very much for your interesting speech. My name is Maria. I'm the president of the Icelandic Association of Social Workers. You stressed the importance of reaching out to the children through the school system. I was wondering if you have see the need, or you already have made some changes to the structural element of the school system to reach out for the families. I'm not thinking only about the children, but for the families, if you have changed the school system in any way.
No, we have not. And we have faced fierce opposition from the authorities. They don't like our programs. They want to do it their own way. They're not very successful, but they keep struggling against. So I would say in 230 schools that we have implemented the PULSE, or the School-wide Positive Behavior Support System, they are very satisfied. We have very nice feedback, and they have restructured the way of working with the children. To me, this should be the future model of all Norwegian schools, be more structured, follow up the children with more praise, more positive feedback, more constructive feedback. But still, we fight about the soul of the schools, so to speak, and we must admit that we haven't been successful in doing something with the school system. But I think, as you maybe imply, that's highly important in order to succeed with our goals. And in our PAL schools, we have for the children with the most serious problems, we give the families an offer to participate in parenting programs. So we try then to combine the early intervention for children at risk model with the PALS model at the top with the most difficult children. And of course, we invite parents along with this model to participate in discussing rules, expectations, and what they would like the schools to implement. So we try to increase the contact between the schools and the families. So I'm quite satisfied with the way these schools are moving, but it's not highly appreciated in the Norway school system as of yet.
Any more questions? No? Okay. Then no more questions, going once, going twice. Nope. Then we say thank you, Terje. Give him a good clap.